All right, I did it. All right, and if you do have questions, please put them in the chat, and then Dorothy will respond to those nearer to the end of the presentation, because she may answer your question as she's going during the presentation. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Dorothy Dougherty from the National Archives in New York City, and I'm going to let her tell you a little bit more about herself.
Great.
So take it away, Dorothy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nancy. And thank you to the library for hosting the National Archives tonight. As Nancy said, I am from the New York office. So we're located down at 1 Bowling Green in New York City in the Alexander Hamilton U.S. Custom House building. And we are actually on the 3rd floor of that building. And my role is as programs director. So I oversee the education, the exhibits, the programs, and the outreach for the office. I have been with the archives for 20 years. And I've had various positions, including working on the catalog, the online catalog, as well as working as a senior records analyst on the records management side, and then on the in the program side of the house. So I'm on the museum side of the archive, so to speak. I'm just hearing a little bit of feedback, so if you are not mute, if you could mute your phone, or your camera, your computer, that would be great. I think at this point, I'm going to start sharing my screen. So I'm going to share my PowerPoint, and hopefully, let's see, I just want to show from the beginning. And I think, Nancy, if you signal to me, everything looks okay?
Yep.
Great. Okay. So there is a lot to cover. And so if you have questions, like Nancy said, please enter them in the chat box, and I'll hopefully, if I don't answer it during the presentation, hopefully I can get to it at the end. So let's just begin with a little background about the National Archives. I'm sure everyone knows this, but we are the nation's record keeper. Just like the Smithsonian is considered the nation's attic, and the Library of Congress is considered the nation's library, we actually are the record keeper. So we are the official repository for all records of the US government. We were not established until 1934. So here you see a picture of the archives being built down in Washington, D.C. It wasn't until Franklin Delano Roosevelt, as president, signed into effect the creation of the National Archives. So really what that means is we did not have every record from the very beginning of our nation's history. When we created the archives in the 30s, we had to go and solicit records from agencies and pull them together in one building. So this was a very difficult task. There are some, on occasion, some records we feel that do belong to the archives that didn't get to us. There are also some records that were either destroyed or just weren't preserved into the 1930s. So if you think we have everything, we have a lot. We might not have every single thing that we should have as a federal archive. But that being said, we do have a lot. I will tell you that the Archivist of the United States has been actively working since 2009 to create an entire digital catalog online. So this is a huge undertaking. He is the 10th Archivist of the United States. His name is David Ferriero, and he is extremely interested in bringing the records to the public digitally. He also was one of the people who spearheaded the Citizen Archivist program. So if you sitting at home find records in our catalog and you want to help tag those records to identify them, let's say you find a record from your hometown or your home state and you know more about that record than is described in that record in our catalog, you can become a citizen archivist to help us tag and identify those records for the greater public. So something to keep in mind. And if you have not been to our DC facility, you should go because that's where the Charters of Freedom are. Every year we welcome over 1 million people into the rotunda down on Pennsylvania Avenue. And that's where you would see the Declaration of Independence, the US Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. If you haven't been there in the last 10 years, they've been upgrading the spaces. We have a lot of galleries that surround the rotunda. Even though we're closed right now due to the coronavirus, it is a wonderful place to go visit if you ever get the chance. And so that brings me to, what do we actually have? The National Archives, as the record keeper for the federal government, actually only has 2 to 3% of the records created by federal agencies. So it's a small amount, and ideally those are records that would be considered archival. They have intrinsic value, and they tell you the story of the government. They actually also identify your rights as an American citizen. And they also document the story of our nation. And within those three headers of what we have records for, we have them in mixed variety. So you could see we have billions of electronic records. Electronic records is anything born digital. That includes emails. So we have a slew of emails that we manage. And we also have, of course, the textual documents. So just give you that slide there so you can get an idea of how much we have in what type of format. And if you look at our map here, you'll see we have over 44 facilities across the country. We include the presidential libraries, starting at Herbert Hoover. That was the first presidential library that went into effect. Again, that was signed into effect by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And so we have a library for every president from Hoover on up. And we also have facilities regionally. So New York is one of them. We also have facilities where we store the records. So some facilities are research centers. Others are where we store records. People like to talk about, you know, the scene at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, where they store the Ark of the Covenant on one of those shelves. Well, we have storehouses just like that for our records. Okay, so we're talking about genealogy, we're talking about immigration and naturalization records. So I wanted to share this slide and just reiterate that the records we're talking about tonight are part of the highest collection of records used by the general public for genealogy research. People are generally looking for census records, US federal census records, passenger arrival records, which means that's the record your immigrant ancestor is documented on, as well as citizenship records, also known as naturalization records. The other significant collection of records people access through the National Archives are military records. And actually veterans are our biggest customer. So I'd be remiss if I didn't remind everyone that this is the centennial for the 19th Amendment passage. And so we have been doing a number of commemorative events throughout the year. If you are on social media, you can share gifts of different suffragette women moving back and forth. You can share stickers, you can share calendar pages, you can download a calendar image to your smartphone as a lock screen. There's some really fun events to celebrate the 19th Amendment. We also do go into our records and showcase. So an image of a woman's suffrage, Mary Louise Boutonnet Baldwin, and a video recording of her, which is in the National Archives. So these are the kinds of things we feature depending on anniversary events and so on. And since we are speaking to folks in Rochester, I know the chat list listed other people from other states, and welcome. But since this was a library in Rochester that invited me to speak tonight, I thought I would remind everyone that one of the key documents we have in the New York office is this Susan B. Anthony arrest record. So this was her indictment for illegal voting in 1872 in the 8th Ward of the city of Rochester, New York. So this is one of the documents we pull out quite a bit in New York when we have VIPs coming. We also had it on display for a while in the New York Welcome Center. And because it's such an important document to teach about, we also have showcased it in our Docs Teach website, which is a free resource for teachers and students. So you could actually even go on to Docs Teach, read the lesson plan, you can download the document, you can actually link to other records about other women suffragettes, and you could also find out more about the other women that were arrested along with Susan B. Anthony. So something just to think about. Okay, so that brings us to the main part of our discussion today. And I always like to tell people, start at our website just to get familiar with the resources we have. So the key to your genealogy research when using records of the National Archives is to figure out where your family member intersected with the government. So, and from there, I pinpoint topical lists, resources, and other tools that we have on our website. So if you go to archives.gov, that's our main site, and you could see where I put this arrow here. This is the Research Our Records box. This is really where you're going to look for information on how to start your research. If you're looking for veterans, you go to the Veterans box. If you're looking for news and events, upcoming events, that's down here. But for our purposes here, if I was to link on this box, Research Our Records, that brings me to this page. And from this page, you can do a couple of things. You could research in the catalog, you could learn about our tools, you could research specific topics, but you could also go directly just to genealogy-focused tools. So I say genealogy-focused tools because remember, the government records are not created specifically for genealogists to use, but there are a number of records we've identified are extremely useful to your genealogical research. So for our purposes here, if I was to link on this button, Research Your Ancestry, that would bring me to this page. And it gives me a really very simple way to start my family research. I can learn about resources. I can learn about records that have been digitized and might be available on other entities, such as like Ancestry or Fold3 or Family Search. I can browse topics. So if I wanted to browse immigration topics, I would link on that, or naturalization records, I would click there. I could also have the link down here for other tools. So this is a really great page to get familiar with. And that will bring me to this page. So I'm going to go back, I'm going to toggle back for a second. If I was to click on this immigration link right here, that brings me to this immigration page. So you could see from the buttons listed on that page, there are a number of records that relate to immigrants and to immigrant arrivals. So I'm not going to focus on all of these tonight. I'm going to just get into our immigration records. If I was to click on that naturalization link, that would bring me to this naturalization page. And it would give me a lot of details.
Oops. Sorry.
Okay.
Dorothy,
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yeah, sorry, that was my fault. I was trying to mute everybody.
Okay, so I showed you a couple of the web pages, which are great starting points for you in doing your research. Now I just want to tell you a little bit about the New York office. So if you're looking for family members in the New York area or in Rochester, upstate New York, again, the New York area, we have federal records for New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the US Virgin Islands. That's the geographic zone that we cover in the New York holdings. So we have about 150,000 file boxes of records related to those 4 areas. And our records actually predate the US government. They go back all the way to 1685. And the records we have The majority of the records are court records. We have a lot of courts in New York and New Jersey. We also have immigration and naturalization records listed in a lot of those court records. And we have popular topics that people come to research on, including the Civil War draft riots, the Puerto Rico Reconstruction Administration, which has been a very popular research collection lately. And I mean, we could go on and on. If you want to learn more, you could go to our page at archives.gov/NYC. I have the link here at the top, and you could learn about all the records we have. You could also just search the catalog for topics, and a record could be in New York, a similar record could be in Boston, a similar record could be in DC. But if you're trying to pinpoint your ancestor in a particular geographic area, you might want to look closer to those records held by that geographic National Archives facility. So I'm going to click on the next link. Okay, all right. Had trouble moving that for a second. Okay, so let's start with passenger arrival records. The National Archives has records from 1820 on up to 1957. 1820 is the starting point because that's when the government officially decided to start tracking immigrants into this country. Okay, so here's a little tidbit of information. We do have some records prior to 1820, very few arrival records into Philadelphia. They're not that many. But officially the government did not start tracking immigrants until 1820. So ideally, the range you're going to be looking at would be 1820 to 1957. And immigrant arrivals, as I will show you in the next few slides, they vary with the amount of information on them. And let's go to the next slide and okay. So here you can see, this is an example of an 1855 ship manifest. Very little information, only 3 people listed on that record. Here's a later, slightly later record, and this is our famous record of Annie Moore, the Irish immigrant who was the first person processed at Ellis Island. This record is 1892, and if you look at the top of the document, it tells you this is for the Port of New York. It also tells you some information down here, the date. It tells us this is the SS Nevada. And then if you start to look at the columns of information, you can see, I think you could see my mouse moving along. Annie Moore is listed there on the second line. She's listed as a 13-year-old girl who's actually coming in with her brothers Anthony and Philip. Anthony's 11, Philip is 9. And then there's additional information you can learn from this particular record. Annie Moore, that statue, that image that was the statue on that arrival slide I just showed you, that's the statue of Annie Moore at Ellis Island. And Annie Moore became the public relations piece for Ellis Island opening. She actually got a gold coin. She was touted as this young, poor Irish immigrant who came over to America all by herself. But if you look at the records, you see she's actually here with her 2 brothers. Now, arrival records, as you saw from the 1855 slide on up to the Ellis Island 1892 slide, the questions vary and the content on the manifest change. It changes almost every couple of years. So depending on when your family member came into this country, you may find a lot of information, you might not find much information at all. I think what is really cool about when you're looking at an immigrant arrival record for the point of finding someone maybe in a naturalization record or where they lived, if you find information like final destination, if you find joining a relative, if you find place of birth, these are all clues to lead you beyond that record and prior to that record. So this is important to note when you're looking at a manifest. You always want to look at all the details of that record. So here's a record that we also love to show. This is slightly later, and this is 1908, and this is Bob Hope. Bob Hope went by the name Leslie. That was his birth name. He later went by the name Bob. So here you see the Hope family starting on this line, and all the family members are listed down below. Leslie is listed right there. I enlarged it just so you could see it. He's actually listed as a 2-year-old boy coming into this country in 1908. I also put in this beautiful picture of Bob Hope when he was visiting Vietnam in 1966. This is an image we have in our catalog. What's interesting about this record, it tells you that Bob Hope came in with his mother and his siblings. So we know his father didn't come with them on this arrival record. So we maybe have to go to another arrival record to find his father. Generally, the male, or the husband, the father might have come earlier. And then when he had enough money, he would send it back to the family. They would come later once he got situated. You can't really see from this record, but if you were to read what Bob's mother was doing, she was actually coming through the port of New York, but her final destination was Ohio, which is where the father was living. So now we have another clue on where we're going to find the Hope family after they arrived. So again, looking at the details of the record are important. So here's just an example of a later record. Now, once you get into the 1930s, you see these records are nice and typewritten, so it's a little easier to read. And again, there's a little more detail. And I think I have one more, yes. This is an example of a plane manifest. So a lot of people say, oh, I want to know what ship they came in on. And if they look at the later records, they find out that the person didn't come in on a ship. They might have come in through a plane. So this was a plane manifest for a plane arriving in JFK, John F. Kennedy Airport in New York. So arrival records are fairly straightforward in terms of research. There are a number of sites you could look at, and the 3 that I listed here, these are just the ones that I have used more than others, so this is why I chose them for this presentation. I will tell you the National Archives has the passenger arrival records, but the National Archives, we don't have that big a staff. We don't have a lot of funding to do massive indexing and scans for a lot of records. So we've partnered with other entities for them to do the scanning and make those records available. So Ancestry, those records have been scanned from 1820 to 1957. That's a subscription service, but you can access Ancestry for free at the archives. And I believe, Nancy, you had said that the library is offering free access for your patrons through the end of the year.
Correct, yes.
So you can go on Ancestry. You can also go on to ellisisland.org. It used to be free. You can search for free, but I looked on it today, and actually there's a price associated with any downloads. But you can also go on to Castle Garden, which is a great website, and that was the first immigration station from 1855 to 1890. Castle Garden is a great site because there's a series of books out there called The Irish to America, the Great Britain to America, the Russians to America, the Germans to America. And this was a series of books put together by Dr. Ira Glazer, who worked for the Balsh Institute many years ago. And Dr. Glazer at one time worked out of the New York office, creating this index, which now has become the castlegarden.org interface. So the data he compiled to develop those volumes of Immigrants to America series is part of the data used in the Castle Garden website. So something to think about when you're starting your research. So just to reiterate, Castle Garden, early immigration station, 8 million immigrants passed through there, mostly from Northern and Western Europe, Ireland, Germany, and England. Here's an example of the website. So if you go to castlegarden.org, this page pops up. And then when you go to search, up comes this interface. You can enter the ship name if you know. You can enter the port of departure. You can search a first name, last name. What I really like about this site too is if you know, if you're having trouble finding someone, maybe because the spelling has changed, you can search from port of departure. You can modify the search and look at the entire record of people that came over for a certain time period, as opposed to having to search by name. So it's a great resource to check out. And Ellis Island, again, a great resource to check out. 12 million immigrants arrived between the key years of 1892 to 1924. The biggest year of immigration was 1907. So 1907, if you look at a manifest from that year, you will get a ton of information on that manifest. And what's great about Ellis Island is about half the people in the US can trace their family through Ellis Island. And just like Bob Hope, they might not have stayed in New York, they might have gone elsewhere in the country. So it's good to search their website if your person leads you there. There are two links. I put up ellisisland.org because that used to be the link that got you to the website. They changed their website recently. Now it's statueofliberty.org/Ellis Island. Either one of those addresses up at the top will lead you to this page, and you could start your search by clicking on this little red button. If you read through their page, you can also click at this point to search. And this is what the search looks like. So you have a little box that comes up. It asks for a name. Now, I don't have any family members that came through Ellis Island. All my family came prior. So for the purpose of this search, I put in Carmine Sarchiapone, which is my husband's family. So I put in the name. I press the search button or the results button. Up comes the next screen, which is this little box down here. And there's one result. It's great. I don't have to go through a whole list of Carmine Sarchiapones. There's only one Carmine Sarchiapone. And I find out that he arrived in 1913 from Pescara, Italy on the ship Verona. And there are three icons over here. You can look at the ship, you can read the contents of the manifest, or you can just click and see the manifest. And this page brings you to that data. So if you want to look at the actual image, you can see there's a ship of a picture of the Verona. If you want to see the image up close and you click on it, right now, it looks like Ellis Island is charging for that. So you can go and see the content without looking at the actual image, but you can read the content of the manifest. But if you want to download that image, they are going to charge you. But if you go to Ancestry, you can get that image right now for free. So I don't think it's, okay, I'm going to scroll back and show you. So here's the 1950 plane manifest. Here's the 1938 passenger manifest. You see there are all these little markings. Some of these have checks, some of these have little numbers here. I'm going to go back ahead and show you that the markings, they really are confusing sometimes, and we get a lot of questions about them. So what's wonderful is Marion Smith, the historian for the Immigration Services Department, she compiled this annotated PDF on how to interpret the markings for arrival records. So this is actually available on the Jewish Genealogy website, so jewishgen.org, and they have a section on resources for the public to use. They have a great website. If you haven't checked it out, they have a link to this PDF right there on their page, and it will answer a lot of questions you might have about your particular manifest. Okay, so arrivals after 1957. Okay, so we don't have all those arrivals scanned and made available online, so you'd have to order them online. If you are looking for someone after 1957, send us an email and we will do our best to get you that record. Right now, I should tell you that the order online feature is not, we're not answering some orders online because of the virus situation. Staff are not all in and able to pull the microfilm and do all that research. But for the databases that we have access to through our share folders, we might be able to get you the information you need. So send us an email if you have a question about a record after 1957. Okay, so we're at 7:30, and that gets us to naturalization records. So if I didn't say it before, we have a lot to cover in this presentation. And I will remind everyone that there are links on all these slides, and I will share these slides afterwards. So you don't have to copy all these URLs down. Everything I'm saying is on our website. And just hopefully I'm presenting it in a way that makes it a little bit easier when you go back to navigate our website. So if you go to our Research Our Records page and you clicked on that Research Our Ancestry button, and then you clicked on the topic of naturalization records, that will bring you to an entire page on naturalization records. And here we have a sampling of early records, later records, arrival records, and then an image of citizens being, an image of immigrants during their naturalization ceremony. So what is naturalization? It's when you become a citizen, and it really didn't start until 1790. Pretty much everything started in 1790, right after the US Constitution. Congress created like a 3-year span for things to begin. So 1790 is the first time they started regulating citizenship. And for the majority of people, there is a general rule where naturalization is a 2-step process. The immigrant comes to this country. Within 2 years, they decide they want to stay. They make a declaration. They file their first papers to become a citizen. Within 3 years of that time, so usually within the 5 years of when they arrived, they decide they're going to make a final petition. They create their final papers, and that's their petition for naturalization. The general rule is most immigrants will become a citizen within 5 years of being here. Now, that's not to say everyone did it, and we certainly have found examples of people who waited many, many years before they became a citizen for whatever reason, but that's the general rule. I should also tell you that we are the federal government, so we should ideally only have federal court records. But before 1906, any court of record could naturalize a person. So that means anyone in the county, any state court could naturalize someone. So if you are having trouble finding a naturalization record for the immigrant that you have identified who came to this country, you might need to check with your local court. So here's an example of one of our more popular records from New York. This is a record, actually, we haven't pulled it out in a while because it's gotten so much light time. We have to keep it in the vault for a little longer. But this is Albert Einstein's Declaration of Intention. That's this first document here. Then his final paper, his petition to naturalize, and associated with it is his certificate of arrival. So why would you want to find someone's citizenship papers? Well, certainly if you want to get your passport, if you need your benefits, if you are a veteran and you need those benefits, you would want your citizenship papers. If you're applying for a job sometimes or a driver's license, you need your citizenship papers. Oftentimes people will come to us and they lost their papers and they need a certified copy. So the New York office, we do a lot of certifications of naturalization records. But what is really cool from a genealogy standpoint is that your citizenship paper, depending on the time that it is created, could have a lot of information. And in this case, Albert Einstein, his image is actually on the document. So for select years in the late 20s and 30s, people had their images affixed to the bottom of the Declaration of Intention. So Einstein came to this country. He declares that he wants to become a citizen in the 30s. What he has up here is all his pertinent information. I don't know if you could see that, but he is Dr. Albert Einstein. He is a professor in Princeton. He is 56 years old. It tells us he's a male. He has white hair, a fair complexion. His eyes are brown. His hair is gray. I'm sorry, his color is white. His hair is gray. He's 5'7" at 175 pounds. It tells us he's of Hebrew nationality. He's German. He's from Germany. He was born in Ulm. It tells us when he was born. It tells us when he was married. It goes on to tell us at this point that he has come to this country, but his 2 children still live abroad. It tells us he came through Bermuda, and now he's petitioning in the court of New Jersey. So 3 years later, he makes his final petition. That's this document. If you read through the contents up at the top of the document, you will find out that at this point, his wife has passed away and his 1 son has come to live with him in the States. So in just 3 years, you have a document that tells you an awful lot about what happened to Albert Einstein. If you didn't know, if he wasn't a famous person, you might not know that. This is a great document as well. You then have the signature down at the bottom, right here. And then on the flip side of that document, you would get the court authorization saying it's certified, it's official. So some cool documents for Albert Einstein. And not everyone in their family will have those type of records. You might have earlier records or later records. The records vary over the years. So we talked about the general rule of naturalization. I should tell you there are some exemptions to the general rule. So some exemptions are derivative citizenship. So derivative citizenship is granted to the wives and children of a naturalized man. This is automatic. So I showed you Bob Hope's immigrant arrival record. He was only 2 when he came to this country. Guess what? He became a citizen. He derived citizenship when his father naturalized. So a few years later, he becomes I think he becomes a citizen in his teen years when his father naturalizes. So he derives citizenship. There's another exemption to the general rule is a woman who was a citizen, if she married a non-American, if she married an alien, someone from another country, she lost her citizenship. You also have children under 21 deriving naturalization from their father for those select years. And then after 1921, women had to petition on their own. So if a woman came to America in 1922 and she wanted to become a citizen, she wasn't married, or she was married, if she wanted to become a citizen, she had to apply herself. You also have rules for minor aliens who, if they arrived in the US within 5 years prior to their 23rd birthday, they could petition, they could make their declaration and petition at the same time, so it's expedited. And then you have veterans preferences. So if a man joins the Army because we're going to war and we need all those men, you can expedite your citizenship papers. You don't have to wait those 5 years. So those are exceptions to the general rule. And since we did talk about the 19th Amendment centennial earlier, I thought this was the perfect example of a woman who lost her citizenship during, because of the Act of 1907, which required or allowed or permitted women who married a foreigner to lose their citizenship. This particular record is for Harriet Stanton Blatch, and this is a record that we've showcased on the National Archives website quite a bit. Our National Archives Foundation put together this great page on her. She's the daughter of Elizabeth Cady Stanton, one of the key suffragettes in the movement, and because she married a man from the United Kingdom, she lost her citizenship. He dies, she decides she wants to become a citizen again and move back to America. So she has to petition. So she petitions in 1911, and this is what her record looks like. I should point out that this rule, this act goes away by 1922. So if you marry a foreigner after 1922, you can still, as a woman, still retain your citizenship. So the rules change quite a bit. And again, it's just kind of a reminder, when you're looking for someone, locate them, their year, and their location, because if they apply, if there are these rules that apply because of the year that they may have become a citizen or the year they lived, that will guide you to other records. So here's an example of a petition for naturalization for someone who joined the military. And this was for World War II. And again, this is an example of an expedited naturalization. And this is for Liberato Liberatore. I hope I say his name correctly. So Liberato lives in New York, but he actually, if you look at the very bottom of the record, you find out that he came to America through Florida, and he came here in August of 1940. And you'll see that he joins the US Army in 1942. Remember, we need men to help with the war effort. So this is his paperwork that expedites him to become a US citizen. And you can see he's in the Army only for a short time. He's honorably discharged, and he's now a citizen. So it's pretty cool. So think about that. And if you have questions specifically for naturalization records, you can go to that main naturalization page. But if you're looking for records for someone from the New York area, we have a finding aid page for the New York office. And it lists the indexes and the records. So sometimes you can search just the index and find the name, and then you have to request the record. But sometimes you can find the index, which will then lead you to the actual record, which may have been digitized, and then you can download a copy. We tell you what's free on what sites and what requires a subscription. And again, Ancestry is free till the end of this year through your library. If you look at this webpage, the German Genealogy Group is listed here. That's this page. So the German Genealogy Group is a group that comes to the New York office. They've been coming for 20 years to do indexing, scanning. They've done 2 million plus records, naturalization records, where they've indexed and scanned those records for us and created these wonderful databases for the public to search. The German Genealogy Group has worked closely with the Italian Genealogy Group, and I mentioned their website because it's not just if you're of German descent or Italian descent, they have records of everyone in their website. So it's a great site to look at. And if you're going to get started, you go to their webpage and you search the databases here on the sidebar. You click on that database search and you scroll down. It links to naturalization records, and this is what the page looks like. This is what the interface looks like. So they make it very easy. You could use a last name search. You could make it exact. You could search by counties, by courts. Most people don't know where their family member, what court they used to get naturalized in. So you can leave this blank and it'll search everything. You press the submit your search button and down will come any response. So I was looking for Carmine Sarchiapone. I could not find a record of him. I asked the Sarchiapone clan. I'm not aware of any naturalization for Carmine, but this is his brother, Guarino. So we know Guarino applied to become a citizen. And if I want to see this record, I know it's in volume 101. This is the record number. I know I'm finding a petition, so that's his final paper. I know he did it in 1921, and it says here, Eastern District of New York. This is the data I will use. Let me go back. That's the data I will use down here. Send it in an email to the New York office at newyork.archives@nara.gov. The email I'll show you at the end. That's what I would send to the archives to say, help me find a copy of this record. And actually the German Genealogy Group has a form you can fill in easily online. So I've covered very quickly 2 major records, and I've showed you a couple of databases, but I'd like to show you what do you do if you don't know who came into the country and you don't know where to begin, how to find them. So I'm starting with my grandfather and his mother. My grandfather, William O'Keefe, his mother was Elizabeth Bonne. We know Elizabeth was born in New York around 1875, roughly. And by looking at family records, I found out that her father's name was Soren. So Soren Bonne, and he apparently was from Denmark. At the time I began my search, I wasn't sure if he was the actual immigrant who came here, but turns out he was. But to make sure that I'm finding the right person, we always like to suggest you start at the beginning. You start with yourself and you back yourself into the next person and then the record. So I looked for my grandfather, I then looked for his mother, and now I'm looking for her father. But I'm going to start in a very simple way using the federal census records. So since Elizabeth Bonne was born in 1875 roughly, I know I can search for her on the census records. And I know the archives has census records from 1790 on up to 1950. And actually, and 1940, actually, that's available currently. I also know that census records vary in their data, and some are very specific in containing immigration information and naturalization information, especially for the years 1900 to 1930. But some of the earlier records do provide information on birthplace. So for our purposes today, I'm going to start with Ancestry, and I'm going to search the US federal census records. And before I do a very broad search, I'm going to look at their interface, and then I'm going to think twice about doing a broad search, and I'm going to pinpoint my search into one of the actual census collections. And since she was born in 1875, I'm going to try and locate her as a child in 1880 because that will list her parents. So if I do that and I pull up the link for the 1880 census and I very simply put in her name, Elizabeth Bonne, I estimate her birth at 1875, give or take a few years. I add her location, and I'm going to add her father's name just to see if I get any results. So this is going to be a very targeted search. I'm going to see what I get. So there are a number of results. You could see 800 results, but Elizabeth Bonne is listed at the very top, and I think this is her, but her parents' name, it says Lauren and Maria. Well, I know her mother's name was Marie, sometimes went by Maria, sometimes went by Johanna. So this might be her because she's living in Brooklyn and the birth date is kind of correct. So let's look at the view record so I could see details about the record. So my next screen shows you details about Elizabeth Bonne, tells me she's living in Brooklyn. This all seems to be correct. I see she's the daughter. And it also tells me her father's name is Lauren. That does not look correct, but I've heard tell that they came from Denmark, so this might be correct. So now I'm going to click on to view the actual image. And here is a screenshot of that web page. And you can see the Bonnes are highlighted in green. And I guess if you were indexing this, you could interpret this name for Lauren, but I think I could interpret it for Soren. I know Soren Bonne was a painter, so this seems correct to me. I know Elizabeth was the oldest. I'm not aware of a brother John, but this could be someone. But I do No, the mother had a sister named Joseph, had a brother, Joseph. Josephine was her sister-in-law, rather, and Benson was the last name. So this, to me, is the Bonne family. And now if I look along the line here and I see this birthplace column, it says Soren is from Denmark. So I'm assuming this is him. Now I want to go a step further. I really want to search the 1890 census, but we know as genealogists that those records were destroyed in a fire many years ago in the census department. And so very few exist. So I have to fast forward to the year 1900. 1900 is a problem because Elizabeth Bonne married in 1898. So now I'm just looking for her parents. So I'm going to switch my search term to Soren Bonne. I'm going to select the 1900 US Census search interface. I'm going to put in his name, and voila, up comes Soren Bonne and his wife Marie and their children Chauncey, Edna, and Albert. And these are all siblings of Elizabeth. So I know this is the right family. And wow, what do we get here? Some beautiful information. Born in Denmark, his parents are from Denmark. And look at this 1875, this is the citizenship box that I highlighted here, and I enlarged it. It tells me he came over in 1875, around 25 years ago, and NA, he has naturalized. So he's naturalized before by 1900. So that gives me a couple of clues. The record that I find for his citizenship might not have a lot of information. It gives me some clues that if he's here by 1875, that's the general range I should find his arrival record for. So I go back into Ancestry and I search the arrival record interface for Soren Bonne, and up comes Soren Christian Bonne, arriving in New York, April 13th, 1871. So the years are a little off, but I'll take it. It tells me he's from Denmark. Very little information, but you could see his name. His name actually is listed in full here, and Christian is abbreviated. So again, when you're doing searching, just look closely at the name. Don't always do an exact search. Don't always add the full name. Maybe it's abbreviated. William is often abbreviated to WM, not the full name spelled out. But here is his beautiful arrival record. And this is on Ancestry. And I'll be honest with you, one of the first days I was in the New York office when I started, I was looking for the Bonnes, and one of the archivists there pulled out the original record, and I was able to look at it. And it was really cool. So it's great that it's been digitized and it's available on Ancestry, because at the time this wasn't on Ancestry. So now that I found his arrival record, and I know he arrived around 1871, I'm going to do a search for his naturalization record. Again, on Ancestry, I click on the naturalization record search. I put in his name, Soren Bonne. I put in New York because I know he's still in New York. He arrived in New York and he's living there in 1900. So I know he stayed in New York, and up comes this image. What's interesting is his name is spelled slightly different, but his date of naturalization is listed as 1875. And this more or less matches what I found on the census record. Sometimes you take dates with a grain of salt on these records, but this is pretty much a total hit for me, because I've not found any other Soren Bonnes anywhere else. So I'm content with this record, and now I have his record, and I found it because I traced back through his daughter, because originally I didn't even know who Soren was. I only knew his daughter Elizabeth. So again, just another type of example for how to find records if you're lost or having difficulty. So that kind of brings us to the end of my presentation. So I'm going to show you very quickly, a couple of slides, if you have any questions or if you're looking for additional information. The National Archives has been working on this collaborative site called History Hub. This is open to researchers, genealogists. It's a kind of an expedited way to answer your email. And if you have a specific question, there's a whole community of people that will look at the question and try and answer it. So History Hub is a great new resource if you want to ask your question through History Hub. And sometimes if your question is more general, you can find the answer in History Hub by looking at the topical list. So a great place to check out History Hub. I would also suggest that you look on our website, on our main page, archives.gov. We have a series of records that we write about in our Prologue magazine. We also have a series of blog posts that we write about certain types of records, digital collections, and so on. And so when I was doing a program on the 1950 census and getting ready for the release of that, I was wondering how much work we've done to get ready for it ourselves at the archives. And I found this great blog about the enumeration district maps for the 1950 census, which will be released in 2022. And all these maps have been digitized. So if you're looking at considering where your family was in 1950 to get ready for the census release in 2022, you can start by looking at some of the maps and figuring out where your family was. So that's some great information. We also have an annual virtual genealogy fair. Actually, we've been doing this for a number of years. This year, actually, unfortunately, the fair has been postponed. Usually is in October. It's been postponed till the spring. But if you miss it, if you don't watch it the day of, it's okay. It's all on our YouTube playlist. So you can go back and search the genealogy fairs from years prior. You can get a full listing of all the presentations that were made and link to the records. They often have handouts and related slides. So this is a great resource. And again, it's a free resource from the archives. So check it out if you haven't seen it already. I also like to leave with a parting shot. I know I gave you a Rochester record before. I have no idea where this is in Rochester. I was in Rochester maybe 30 years ago. It's been a long time. And this was an image I found. It's an aerial view. I just went to our catalog and typed in the word Rochester and looked up images. And this is what I found. So if anyone wants to be a citizen archivist, you can go into our catalog and maybe you can give us some more details about what we're seeing in that image. So some good stuff. I will also tell you if you have additional questions about immigration records and specifically naturalization records, the United Citizenship and Immigration Services has a wonderful genealogy site. They also do some presentations, so check out their genealogy page. You can get copies of records through them. And what they have is what we have. But if you're looking for someone from 1991 on up to modern current day, the National Archives does not have those records. The United States Citizenship and Immigration Services has retained those records. So if you need immigration records from 1991 on up to current day, you have to contact them. All of this information is on their website. And I will leave you with a parting shot of my family. So my grandfather, William R. O'Keefe, that's his daughter, my mother, the little girl there eating the candy apple. That's her mother who married William O'Keefe. And that's Elizabeth Bonne sitting in the chair. So this is not an archive photo from the National Archives. This is from my own personal archives. But I like to share some of my own story just to show you how easy it is sometimes to find your family in the National Archives records. So with that, I guess I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll go back to see if there are any questions.
So I have, I'm going to try to read these the best I can. So where the immigration from Canada records kept during the year 1929. The immigration was from Canada to Rochester.
Yes, so we do have all of the Canadian border crossing records in the catalog, and they should be on Ancestry at this point. So if you go to the main archives page and you click on that naturalization link, that will link you to all the types of records we have. So if your immigrant family came in through any port in the United States or across the border, we have those records. But for today's program, I'm sorry I did not include one of those examples, but you can get those on Ancestry. You might even be able to get them on Family Search as well.
Okay, and the facilities that you showed, what was the key for that? The circles and the colored circle?
The circles, the facilities, was that the map that I showed?
Yes, yeah.
So the map I showed, that was a listing of all the National Archives facilities across the country. So we have facilities in California, Boston, Philadelphia, New York, Chicago, and then it listed all the presidential libraries as well. So I guess the point of that slide is to say we're across the country. We're in an archive repository near you. If you can't come visit us in person, and you can't right now because we're closed due to the virus, but if you can't visit us in person, you can certainly send any of our facilities an email. And if your question really relates to records that are maintained by another facility in the archives, then we will forward it on to them. And since this is a program given by the New York office, you can certainly send an email to the National Archives at New York. So we are newyork.archives@nara.gov. That's our email.
And the Susan B. Anthony, can that be seen online?
That is online, so that's in Docs Teach. That's also in our catalog. That was also showcased on our Rightfully Hers webpage. I think the umbrella page for all those documents is archives.gov/women.
Okay, and then I'm not really sure which this one refers to. It says, is there any Pennsylvania, New Jersey, or Connecticut?
So the Pennsylvania records would be in our Mid-Atlantic office, and that would be all of Mid-Atlantic or the Philadelphia archives. They have all the Mid-Atlantic states. Records for the New England states would be in our Boston facility. So the National Archives at Boston has those records. And I will just say, we don't expect everyone to know where all their records would be. So if you sent an email to the main National Archives webpage, down in DC, they would forward it to the right location or answer. So you don't necessarily need to know everyone's email address to get the answer you need.
Okay, thank you. A relative came to the United States in 1872, but decided to return to Switzerland shortly thereafter. Are there records of people traveling back to Europe then?
There are. We have actually found a number of naturalization records that were never completed. For some reason or another, people decided they weren't going to continue the process. Sometimes they didn't have the money, or their witness didn't show up when they went to their final appointment at court. We also have records of when people left. So, but sometimes those are harder to find.
And I believe you already addressed this, but does Boston have a similar National Archive?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And I think that might be it. So a lot of very positive comments. Wow, Dorothy, thank you so much. This was excellent and extremely informative. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dorothy. It was wonderful. Great photo. So cute. Fantastic presentation. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for a very informative meeting. So much great info. Excellent. Thank you so much. Terrific presentation. Okay, here's another question. Would there be any records of arrival for an immigrant coming by a fishing boat?
Hmm.
Maybe I'll, and then there's a follow-up, I think.
Well, I guess the question is if the fishing boat, that's a tough one. If it's an unofficial boat, I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know that I could answer that one. I'd have to know a little bit more. I will tell you, if you cannot find a person, it could be that they, crossed the border. They came down through a different port. If you're looking for someone in New York and you assume they came through Ellis Island, that might not be the case. They might have come down through Canada. Sometimes that route was cheaper. We also have a number of records in New York that are crew lists, and they notoriously list immigrants who were picked up at various ports because the ship needed crew members to transport the goods back to the United States. And so we have a huge collection of crew lists. And I mean, I would venture to say there were people that came to the country unofficially in various ways. So the thing is, when you look for arrival records and naturalization records, you look for the process where they came officially. So that's not always the case. I think if you can't find the record and you've exhausted all your efforts, maybe that's when you call in the expert before you give up. But it might be that you cannot find the record because it either doesn't exist or we're looking in the wrong place, maybe because it came in unofficially.
Yeah. And where can you find what local courts would be in a given time frame before 1906?
So if you're looking for the New York records, a New York court, we have a list of the courts on our naturalization finding aid page. We also have inherited a number of those documents from the courts. So ideally, the National Archives has only federal records, and ideally we should not have county or state court records, but we inherited a collection of dexigraphs, which was that reverse image record you saw for Soren Bonne, that black image with the white writing. That's a dexigraph. So we have a huge collection of that in New York. So ideally we shouldn't have it, but we inherited it. It was given to us, we accepted it, and we've created an index for it. So if the records we have, you can't find the person you're looking for, then we would say, where was your person living? Were they living in another locale? Maybe they went to a local court, and then we would send you to that local court. We have a PDF of all the New York City court houses that you should consider for naturalization records. And I believe Philadelphia and Boston have the same thing. And again, if you don't, if you have a question like that, send it to us in an email and we'll point you in the right direction.
Wonderful, thank you. I think there's a couple more here. Is there a time limit of maximum years between intent and certification?
No. One of the archivists years ago found that a woman had applied for her citizenship 50 years after she arrived. So I guess the question, so maybe the question is there, do you expire? Do you have to reapply? I'm not sure, but I do know that we've had immigrants who arrived and we found evidence that they petitioned long after their arrival. So maybe I'm answering two questions. One is I don't know.
Okay, here's the last question that I see. My native-born great-grandfather took his family to Czechoslovakia in 1903. Where would that ship record be? They might have left from Savannah.
Good question. I would say, so if you can't find them on a census record, they left from Czech, they arrived, you think they came into this country by 1903? I don't know. Send us an
Born here in
email.
America.
Say that again?
He was born in Georgia, USA, and took his family to Czechoslovakia.
Oh, good question. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Would,
All right, thank you.
would they have records in Czechoslovakia of the ships that traveled there, or no?
I've not done research for that. You could send us an email and one of the archivists can give you a response. It might be, I don't know, or they might be able to point you in a different direction. If you'd like to send us an email, that might be the best way.
Okay. And I think that is it. So thank you so much, Dorothy. This was wonderful, wonderful presentation. Very informative and very helpful.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And thank you, everyone. Good luck with your research.
And as I said, I will be sending out a follow-up email. Probably look for it early next week, and we'll have the PowerPoint slides, so you'll have all that information right on your computer. And hope everybody has a great night. And I'll also send you information about next month's meeting as well. So thanks for coming. I always appreciate seeing everybody. It's good to see you all, and hopefully we'll get together in person soon. But have a good night. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.